There's something most of us have probably never noticed, even if we've been inside hundreds of these buildings. Churches face east. Not all of them, not perfectly, but enough that if you pay attention, you start to see it everywhere. The altar at the eastern end, the entrance at the west, the congregation sitting in rows, all facing the same direction, toward the rising sun. And it's not just churches. Mosques have their prayer walls oriented toward Mecca. Synagogues traditionally face Jerusalem. Buddhist temples often align with cardinal directions. Hindu temples follow elaborate orientation rules tied to the position of the sun and stars. These aren't accidents. These aren't conveniences. Someone decided, a long time ago, that the building had to face a particular direction. And then everyone else kept doing it. For centuries, across continents, through architectural styles that changed everything else about how these buildings looked. The orientation stayed. And here's what's strange. If you ask why, you'll get answers. Theological ones, symbolic ones, practical ones about prayer direction or solar alignment. But none of them quite explain why it matters so much. Why a building needs to face east or toward a city or align with the stars just to be a place where people gather to pray. What is it about direction, about orientation in physical space that seems to be essential to encountering the sacred? Before we go further, if you're enjoying this, consider subscribing to Belief Explained Simply. We explore questions like this without rushing to conclusions. And if someone you know might appreciate this kind of conversation, share it with them. All right, let's continue. Let's start with what we can observe. Christian churches, particularly older ones, almost universally face east. The technical term is orientation, literally facing toward the orient, the east. The altar is at the eastern end. The main entrance is at the west. When you enter, you walk toward the sunrise. When the priest celebrates Mass, he traditionally faced east, toward Jerusalem, toward Eden, toward the direction Christ was believed to return from. This isn't just European. It's in Ethiopian churches, Armenian churches, Russian Orthodox cathedrals, medieval chapels, modern basilicas, different styles, different centuries, different theological traditions within Christianity, same orientation. Islamic mosques have a different system, but the principle is identical. Every mosque has a qibla wall, the wall that faces Mecca, and within that wall is the mihrab, a niche that marks the exact direction of prayer. Wherever you are in the world, when you pray in a mosque, you face Mecca. In Indonesia, that's west. In Morocco, that's east. In Turkey, that's south. The direction changes depending on where you are, but the principle doesn't. Prayer requires orientation toward a specific point on earth. Jewish synagogues traditionally faced Jerusalem. In Europe, that meant east. In America, it meant east or southeast. In India, it meant west. The Torah Ark, which houses the sacred scrolls, is placed on the wall facing Jerusalem. When the congregation prays, they face the Ark, which means they face the holy city. Again, the specific direction varies by location, but the need for direction doesn't. Hindu temples follow even more complex rules. The main deity's shrine is often placed at the eastern end, facing the rising sun. But different deities have different directional associations. The entrance may face east or north, or another direction, depending on the temple's purpose and the deity being honored. There are entire texts, the Vastu Shastra, devoted to the proper orientation and layout of sacred buildings. It's not optional, it's not decorative, it's essential. Buddhist temples often face east, toward the direction Buddha achieved enlightenment. But like Hindu temples, the specifics can vary by tradition, by location, by which aspect of Buddhist teaching the temple emphasizes. What doesn't vary is that orientation matters. The building must face correctly, or it isn't quite right. Now you might think, well, these are just traditions, holdovers from ancient times when people cared about cardinal directions more than we do now. Except the practice hasn't stopped. Modern mosques still orient toward Mecca. Modern synagogues still face Jerusalem. New churches, even contemporary ones with radical architecture, still tend to face east, or at least acknowledge the tradition. Architects use GPS now instead of compasses and astronomical observations. But they're still doing it, which suggests this isn't just tradition in the sense of old habit we keep for nostalgia. It's tradition in the sense of something that keeps being necessary. Here's where it starts to feel strange. Direction is arbitrary, right? North, south, east, west. These are human concepts, ways we organize space. The universe doesn't care which direction you face, and yet nearly every major religious tradition acts as if it does care, as if facing the right direction is prerequisite to sacred encounter, as if a building oriented wrong would be, what, less holy, not functional, displeasing to God? What is it about humans that makes us need our sacred spaces to point somewhere? Let's think about what orientation actually does. When you enter a mosque, a church, a synagogue, a temple, you immediately know which direction is sacred. You don't have to ask. You don't have to think about it. The architecture tells you. The altar is there, the mihrab is there, the ark is there. Your body knows where to face before your mind registers why. This is different from other kinds of buildings. A theater has a stage, but you could rotate the whole building and it would work the same. A library has sections, but their arrangement is practical, not sacred. Your home has rooms, but their orientation is about light and view and convenience. But a religious building, the orientation is load-bearing. Change it, and something fundamental breaks. Not structurally, spiritually. There's a concept that shows up in multiple traditions. The axis mundi, the world axis. It's the idea that there's a center point to the universe, a place where heaven and earth connect, where the divine breaks through into the physical world. In Christian tradition, that axis runs from Eden through Jerusalem to the New Jerusalem, east to east, so to speak. In Islamic tradition, the Kaaba in Mecca is the earthly center, the point around which the faithful orient themselves, literally and metaphorically. In Hindu cosmology, Mount Meru is the cosmic center. Temples are often understood as architectural representations of this sacred mountain. What these all share is the idea that sacred space isn't random. It's organized around a center, an axis, a direction that matters. And when you build a sacred building, you're not just making a place for people to gather. You're creating a physical alignment with that cosmic order. You're orienting the building, and by extension the people in it, toward the center of everything. But here's the thing. Most people in these buildings don't think about this. They don't walk into church thinking, I am now facing the cosmic east, aligning myself with the axis of creation. They just know where the front is. They sit facing that direction. They pray facing that direction. And it feels right. So maybe the orientation isn't primarily about cosmic geography. Maybe it's about something more immediate, about what it does to a group of people to all face the same direction. Think about what happens in a mosque during prayer. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, all standing in rows, all facing exactly the same direction, all performing the same movements at the same time. The uniformity is striking. You're not facing each other, you're not in a circle, you're not sitting however you want. You're aligned, parallel, part of a pattern. And that pattern extends beyond the room you're in, because at that exact moment, Muslims around the world are also praying, also facing Mecca, also creating these lines of orientation that if you could see them from space would all converge on a single point. You're not just aligned with the people in the room, you're aligned with everyone, everywhere, who shares this practice. The orientation makes that visible, makes it physical. In a church, the congregation faces east together, not toward each other, not inward like a town hall meeting or a therapy circle, outward, together, all looking in the same direction toward something beyond the room. And the priest, traditionally, didn't face the congregation. He faced the same direction they did. He was leading them, yes, but not by standing opposite them, addressing them, by standing in front of them, facing the same direction, guiding them toward what they all oriented themselves toward. It's a completely different social geometry than what we're used to. Modern life is full of face-to-face arrangements, meetings, conversations, performances where the audience faces the performer. But in traditional religious architecture, everyone faces the same direction, which changes what you're doing. You're not an audience. You're not even exactly a congregation in the modern sense. You're fellow travelers, fellow pilgrims, all oriented toward the same distant point. There's something about facing a direction that's different from facing a person. When you face a person, the interaction is immediate, present, between you and them. When you face a direction, you're reaching toward something that's not here, something distant, something you're pointing yourself toward but may never reach. In Christianity, you face east because that's where Christ will return from, but he hasn't returned yet. In Islam, you face Mecca, but most people will never go there. In Judaism, you face Jerusalem, but for centuries, Jerusalem was occupied, inaccessible, a memory and a hope more than a place. The orientation is toward something absent, something longed for. And maybe that's the point. Maybe sacred architecture works by making absence physical, by building into the very structure of the space a direction toward what's not here. Here's another pattern worth noticing. In many traditions, the sacred direction aligns with the sun. East, the direction of sunrise, the place where light comes from each morning. This shows up everywhere. Christian churches face east, Hindu temples often do too, Buddhist temples. Even some Islamic mosques, where Mecca happens to be east, align with both the holy city and the sunrise. And there's something profound about that, because the sun doesn't stay in the east. It rises there, yes, but then it moves. By midday it's south, by evening it's west. But the building doesn't move. The building captures a single moment in the sun's journey, the rising, and holds it, makes it permanent. Every time you enter that building, you're entering a space organized around dawn, around beginning, around light emerging from darkness, around the daily resurrection of the sun. In medieval cathedrals, this was taken even further. They were built so that on certain holy days, Easter, the winter solstice, a saint's feast day, the rising sun would shine through a particular window, or illuminate a particular altar, or strike a specific point in the building. The architecture was a calendar, a cosmic clock. It didn't just face east. It participated in the movements of the heavens. And when the light came through at the appointed time, it was a confirmation that the building was rightly oriented, that the cosmos was in order, that heaven and earth were aligned. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. We don't think this way anymore. We don't orient ourselves by cardinal directions. We use GPS, which tells us how to get somewhere, but not which direction we're fundamentally facing. Our buildings face whatever direction the street grid dictates, or where the view is best, or how the architect wanted to use the light. Direction is functional for us, navigational, not sacred. And maybe that's fine. Maybe we've moved beyond needing to orient ourselves cosmically. Or maybe we've lost something. Not something religious, necessarily, but something about being situated, about knowing where we are in relation to the larger world, about facing toward something. There's a writer named Yifu Tuan who talks about the difference between space and place. Space is abstract, geometric. It doesn't matter where you are in space, it's all equivalent. But place is particular. It's here, not there. It has meaning that comes from orientation, from relationship to other places. And sacred architecture, with its strict orientations, its alignments with distant cities and cosmic events, is all about transforming space into place. You're not just in a building, you're in a building that faces Jerusalem, that faces Mecca, that faces the rising sun. You're situated in a cosmos, part of a geography that's both physical and spiritual. You know where you are, not just in terms of address, but in terms of meaning. Let's come back to the question. Why does sacred architecture care so much about direction? Maybe it's because direction is one of the most basic ways humans organize experience. Before we had language, we had bodies, and bodies are directional. We face things, we turn toward, we orient, and when we orient together toward the same thing, something happens. We become aligned, literally, not just in belief or intention, but in physical space. We stand parallel. We face the same absence. We point ourselves together toward something beyond the room. And maybe that shared orientation creates the possibility of community in a way that facing each other doesn't. Because when you face each other, you're always individuals, separate, looking at each other's differences. But when you face the same direction, you're similar, aligned, part of a pattern bigger than yourself. There's something else. Direction implies journey. If you're facing east, you could, in theory, walk that direction for a long time and eventually arrive somewhere. In Christianity, you'd arrive at Jerusalem, at the site of resurrection. In Islam, you'd arrive at Mecca, at the house of God. In Judaism, you'd arrive at the Temple Mount, at the place where heaven met earth. These traditions all at some point involved actual pilgrimage, actually walking toward the sacred direction. And the building, oriented toward that distant goal, was a kind of perpetual pilgrimage in place. You couldn't always make the journey, but you could face the direction. You could align yourself daily with the path you would walk if you could. The orientation was a promise, a reminder, a way of living toward something even when you couldn't move toward it. In a mosque, there's often a beautiful paradox. The Qibla wall, the one facing Mecca, is the most decorated wall in the building. Elaborate calligraphy, geometric patterns. The mihrab is usually the most ornate architectural element, but it's not meant to be the focus of worship. You're not praying to the wall, you're praying through the wall toward what's beyond it. The wall is a pointer, a gesture, an architectural way of saying, not here, there. And maybe all sacred architecture works this way. Not by containing the sacred, but by pointing toward it. Not by being the destination, but by orienting you toward a destination you can't see. Here's what sits with me. Modern buildings, homes, offices, shopping centers are oriented by convenience, by traffic patterns, by solar gain for energy efficiency, by views, all practical considerations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they don't orient you toward anything beyond themselves. They don't point. They don't align you with anything larger. They're just there, functional, self-contained, and maybe that's why they don't feel sacred. Not because there's no ritual in them, not because no one prays there, but because they don't participate in any larger order. They don't face anything. They don't point anywhere. They're floating, untethered. And when you're in them, so are you. I keep thinking about that moment when you walk into an old church or mosque or temple, and even if you're not religious, even if you're just a tourist, you can immediately feel which direction matters. You don't have to be told. The architecture tells you. The light, the height of the ceiling, the placement of the most beautiful or sacred objects, everything pulls your attention toward one direction. And for a moment, you're oriented, not just in the building, but in something larger. You're facing east, you're facing Mecca, you're facing Jerusalem. You're part of a pattern that extends beyond your body, beyond the building, beyond your city, across the earth. And maybe that's what sacred orientation gives us. Not certainty about cosmic geography, but the experience of being part of something organized, aligned, larger than ourselves. The experience of facing towards something together. There's a rabbi who talks about prayer direction like this. When we face Jerusalem, we're not trying to aim our prayers better, like they need to travel to a specific location. We're reminding ourselves that we're part of a people, scattered across the world, but connected. And one thing that connects us is that wherever we are, we turn toward the same place. That act of turning, of orienting, makes the connection real. Not just conceptual, physical. You turn your body, and so do they, and for a moment, invisible lines connect all of you, converging on a single point. Maybe the question isn't, why do religious buildings face specific directions? Maybe the question is, what does it feel like to be in a space that faces nothing? Because that's what most of our spaces do now. They don't face. They don't point. They don't orient us toward anything beyond themselves. And we don't notice because we're used to it. But maybe there's something in us that still wants to face toward something. Not just navigate toward it on a map, but orient ourselves toward it in space, to stand aligned with others, all facing the same direction, all part of the same pattern, even if what we're facing is distant, even if we'll never reach it. Maybe especially then. So when you walk into one of these old buildings and you feel that pull toward the front, toward the altar, toward the mihrab, toward the east, maybe what you're feeling isn't just architecture. Maybe it's the echo of something older. The human need to know which way is toward, to be part of a community that faces together, to participate with your body in an order larger than your individual life. The building doesn't answer why any of this matters. It just holds the direction and invites you to face it. If this brought up something for you, a thought, a question, maybe even a disagreement, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Not looking for answers, just what this made you think about. I read every one, and if this was worth your time, please subscribe, like, and share. It really helps us keep making these. Thanks for watching.